Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. Her name is Toby Dorr. She just published a book in June 15th, 2022. Title is Living with Conviction, Unexpected Sisterhood, Healing, and Redemption in the Wake of Life-Altering Choices. And she has a tale to tell about something that happened to her that really did change her life. She never had a traffic ticket, and people may have heard of her story on the news. She was minor celebrity when this event happened, and it's happened. This kind of situation has happened in multiple cases, but she can talk more about that. So, Toby Dorr, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, William. I'm happy to be here.
Great. I'm glad you're here. Yeah.
Thanks. A lot of people may have known me better as the dog lady. And when I start telling my story, even people say, "Oh, I don't know who you are." And I start telling the story and they always go, "I remember that story." But it was a pretty crazy story. I was like Miss Goody Two Shoes, never did anything wrong, straight A student, never had a curfew. And I started a prison dog program in 2004 because I had a cancer diagnosis. And, you know, when you hear cancer after your name, it kind of makes you stop and take stock and realize that we don't have unlimited time here. And so if you want to do something that makes a difference, then you need to do it because we don't know how much time we have. So after I recovered from my cancer surgery, I decided that I was going to start a dog rescue group. And within just a few days of my starting the dog rescue group, someone from the prison up the street from us came and visited me and asked if I would consider having a prison dog program. And I jumped at the chance. That was on a Monday. And on a Wednesday, they had me come and give a presentation to the warden and his executive staff about how my prison dog program would look. I didn't have a clue, but I just kind of flew by the seat of my pants and, you know, put together some ideas. And so on Wednesday, I presented to the warden and his staff, and they loved my idea. And they said, "Can you bring dogs in on Friday?" And I had only started the rescue group on that Monday. So I had to like scramble around and go find dogs that needed homes. And I started the prison dog program in August of 2004 with 7 dogs. And by the time I left the prison dog program 18 months later, I had rescued 1,000 dogs. Wow. So it was a big program and I loved it. It was making a difference in the world, and just bringing dogs into the prison changed the whole atmosphere of the prison. You know, as human beings, we're social creatures and we long, for connection with other people. But inside a prison is such an artificial and dangerous environment that connections with other people are, they're forbidden. They get you in trouble. So you can imagine going 10 years, 20 years without ever hugging anyone or having someone to confide in. And then when we bring a dog into the prison and all of a sudden these men can hug this dog and walk the dog around the prison yard and tell their deepest secrets to something. It just changed the whole attitude of the prison almost overnight. And the warden's office, kept asking me, "Can you bring more dogs? We have more more inmates that want to be dog handlers." And I think the most dog handlers we had at any given time was 80. And it was a huge program. It was the only program in the country at the time that had dogs in medium custody, minimum custody, the maximum custody part of the prison. And I even had dogs in the mental health unit. So the dogs really were changing the whole environment of the prison.
And were those dogs, did they get circulated through, or were they there permanently? Were we placing
No, they came in maybe for 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the dog, until we had them housebroken and they knew basic commands: sit, stay, and down, and come, and they could walk on a leash without pulling, and they didn't jump on people. So once we had them, well-mannered house pets, then people would come and adopt them. And this prison dog program was just outside of Kansas City, which is right in the center of the country. But we had people drive from Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Dallas, just to adopt one of our dogs because they loved the idea of getting a dog that had changed the life of an inmate. So we had a high demand for our dogs. And I still run into people today on Facebook, or when I lived in Kansas City, I even went to a garage sale once, and this lady was talking about how she'd adopted this dog from a prison dog program, and she wondered what happened to the woman who ran that program. And it turns out there I was in her garage looking at her couch. It just is crazy how big the program got.
And were you kind of, how did you guys get financing? Was it all
through... it was through the adoption fees. That was all. We would charge $150 to adopt a dog, and all of our dogs were spayed and neutered and on heartworm preventative. And we had worked out some deals with some local vets to give us spay and neuters at discounted prices. So when we adopted a dog out at $150, we might make $50 or $75 that we could put back into the budget to pay for dog food and things like that. We didn't have to pay the inmates anything, so there was no labor involved, and I didn't get paid. So we just mostly had to pay for gas and dog food and vaccinations and spays and neuters.
And so that progressed, and you were just at one facility at that time, right?
Yes. Well, the prison, I was actually at 4 different locations within the prison, but 3 of them were all on the same campus. So, they were together, but they were just separated because one was minimum custody, and one was medium custody, and one was maximum custody. But then the mental health unit was a 30-minute drive away.
And this is what, 2005,
2004 to 2006. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And so you're talking with all the wardens, the officials there, as well as the inmates, correct?
Yes. And I tried to have dog obedience classes in each one of the locations at least once a week, which would be for 2 hours. And then I tried to have another time when I was up there at a time when people could ask questions, or we could work on teaching the dogs some tricks. We took in every kind of dog. We had 3-legged dogs. We had dogs that were deaf and were blind. The men were teaching the deaf dogs sign language, and they were teaching the blind dogs, step up, step down, so that they knew to go up and down steps. And it just was really a beautiful thing. We were really doing great work for those dogs and for the men in the prison.
Right. It works. That's a tough environment. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting that you were outside and may not have had any foreboding about.
No.
Right.
No.
So what happened next?
So I ran the prison dog program for 18 months, and, things were going pretty smoothly. But I was at a place in my life where it was kind of tumultuous. I had been laid off from my job just before I started the prison dog program. I'd had a pretty big corporate job at Sprint, and that, was upsetting to try to find your footing and figure out who you were when your whole life had been this job that you had. I had cancer and was recovering from cancer myself. My dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he was dying, and my 2 sons left home for college. So, there were so many things that came together all at once, and it kind of was the perfect storm. And, my husband and we started dating when I was 15. We married when I was 20. I never dated anyone else. And I didn't have any kind of a relationship to compare my relationship to. But when my sons left home, I realized that my husband and we had nothing in common. Our lives had grown so diverse and so separate that, activities with our sons was the only thing we had in common. And now they were gone too. So, and then with the biggest impact to my life at that time was my dad. And we knew he was dying. He had less than a year by the time he was diagnosed with his cancer. And after one particularly emotional day where they had to rush my dad to emergency surgery, and we nearly lost him, and I spent the whole night at the hospital. And then I left and I drove to the prison, to go do my job and check on the dogs. And one of the dog handlers, John Maynard, met me in the prison yard, and he said, Toby, what's going on with you? You're really upset. I can just tell. I can see it in your eyes. What's going on with you? And I said, well, I mean, first of all, he's the only person who ever even asked me how I was doing. My husband didn't even ask me. And it just felt like such a breath of fresh air to have someone notice me and pay attention to me. And I kind of realized that most of my life, for almost all my entire life, I've been searching for significance somewhere. And I lived most of my life just being invisible. I was that person, the glue that held everything together and made sure everything got done. And nobody ever even noticed. But now this man was noticing that I was upset. And, I told him my dad had surgery, and he said, that's terrible. And he said, I'm so glad that your husband was there with you to help you, because that had to have been a really tough night. And I said, well, he wasn't there, because he stayed home because he didn't want to lose any sleep. And he said there was nothing he could do at the hospital. So there was no sense in both of us staying up all night, which sounded normal to me until I was repeating it that day to John. And I realized by the look on his face that seemed kind of odd. And then John asked me, why are you married to him? And I didn't have an answer. I couldn't come up with an answer. And what really bothered me is, shouldn't I have an answer for that? Shouldn't that be something that's right at the tip of my tongue? And so for days, I stayed away from the prison, and I just kind of wrestled with that question in my mind about, why was I still married? What was this married? What was I doing? And I never could come up with an answer for it. So, once that door's kind of open, that thought's kind of open, it's kind of hard to get rid of it. And so, nothing really happened. And I just went on doing my job as the prison dog program lady, the dog lady. But, throughout the next few months, John and I started talking more often, because at the same time this happened, I was accosted by one of my dog handlers in the prison yard, and he had his fists up and he was going to hit me. And I was so startled, because I'd never been, threatened or felt fear in any way. And that just kind of really upset me and made me afraid to come into the prison. But John met me at the gate when I came in every time after that, and escorted me around so that nobody would bother me and I would feel safe, which just gave us opportunity to have a lot more conversation than we might normally have had.
So your relationship kind of grew with that going on. Did you know his background? And
I did know his
background. Did you find out? So you kind of knew that he had,
yeah,
what his history was.
Yeah, I did. Some of the inmates told me what their history was. Some of them didn't, but I eventually figured it out. I didn't really pay attention to what their histories were, because I just wanted to see them for how they were with the dogs and not be influenced by anything else. John Maynard was serving a life sentence for felony murder. And felony murder means that you were committing a felony at the time someone was killed, and that you weren't the one who killed them, but you were involved in an act where someone was killed. So a friend of his, they were stealing a car, and they thought the car was empty. And John opened one door and got in, and his friend went around and opened the other door, and there was a man sleeping inside the car. And John, the buddy that John was with, had a gun, and he shot the man and that was in the car and killed him. So they were both found guilty of murder. And in some way, it made me feel like his crime was a little bit less than murder, because he didn't kill anyone. So to me, it seemed, that he wasn't as dangerous as a murderer might be.
He was young at the time too.
He was 17. Yeah,
17
he was
in his
17.
teens, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he got tried as an adult.
Yes. So John and I ended up spending more and more time together. And, after a few months, he said, Toby, I think I'm in love with you. And I haven't been in love. And, and he said, I don't know what's going on, but I can't eat. I can't sleep. I can't do anything. And I realized that I was feeling the same way. And so, after a few weeks after he'd made that admission, he asked me if he wasn't in prison, would I be with him? And I said, maybe, thinking it's not going to happen because he's not getting out. But if he was out, maybe we could make a relationship work. I don't know. And so John kind of took that as a green light to figure out how he was going to get out of prison. And he'd approach me with ideas, and he'd say, if I put myself in a box and ship myself out somewhere, and I'd say, well, that is a dumb idea and it won't work because of this reason, or this reason. And then he wouldn't say anything. And a few days later, he'd come back and say, well, how about this idea? And I'd say, well, that's even dumber than the first idea. And to me, it felt kind of like a game, like we're just this fantasy game kind of thing. And then one day he said, I could hide in your dog van when you come to pick up dogs for adoption. And I said, well, now that idea would probably work. And so he was off and running, trying to figure out how he was going to make it work. And I just thought it was a casual conversation. But a few weeks later, he approached me and said, I think I got it figured out. And I said, I can't do that. I'm not doing that. And then I thought about it for a couple of days. And then I thought, well, maybe I could do that. And so on February 12th, 2006, I pulled into the prison in my dog van to pick up dogs for a regular dog adoption. And one of the unit team leaders had asked me to take this big metal crate out of the prison because it was a danger. Men could take it apart and use the metal bars, as shanks. But I'd had a pregnant dog and puppies in it, and they had all been adopted. And so, John was standing there when the unit team leader told me I needed to get it out. And he said, well, I have an idea. How about if I take that down to Toby's van next time she comes in for a dog adoption? We'll just put it in the van for her because that crate is way too big for her to carry. And the unit team leader said, that's a good idea. I'll make a note and let the officer at the guard shack know that you're going to do that. Well, then the day of the adoption, John told his roommate and a couple other guys who were in the room next to him that he had gotten called into work, but he'd already made arrangements to take this crate down and put it in my van. So if he had the crate and all the equipment on the farm wagon, which I had a farm wagon that I could carry 50-pound sacks of dog food around inside the prison. If he had the crate and all the dog equipment inside the crate and on this farm wagon, would they wheel it down and put it in my van for me? Because he had gotten called into work, and they said, sure. So that's what they did, except that he was hidden inside of a box that was inside of the dog crate. And so they loaded it into my van, and I drove off. And, there was a huge part of me that hoped that he wasn't in the box. And there was a big part of me that was excited that he might be in the box. And we would go have this wonderful getaway. And when I pulled out of the first gate of the prison, I had to drive through three gates to get out. And when I pulled through the first two, I'd said, John, are you in there? And he didn't answer. And I felt this huge sense of relief and thought, wow, he's not in there. Oh, thank goodness. I'm just going to go do a dog adoption like normal. But when I got off the prison ground and actually out into the city, he popped out of the box and said, and, just started laughing. And it just startled me. And I pulled the van over and he said, drive, Toby, drive. And so I drove and we were off.
You were off. So that was it. And at what point did the jail realize he was missing?
Well, the escape was about 10:30 in the morning, and the next count was at 3:30 because on a Sunday and it was a visiting day. So we had, 5 hours of a head start before they knew someone was missing.
And what happened next?
So I went to my house and I dropped the dogs off that I'd picked up to take to adoption. I dropped them off in my barn, and then we drove to a storage unit where I had stored a pickup truck that I'd bought, and we pulled the truck out of the storage unit and put the van in the storage unit and closed the door and got in the truck and left. And we were gone for 12 days. We had rented a cabin in Tennessee in the mountains for a month, but we didn't know what we were going to do after that month was over. And I am so not a good criminal. I sent the title to the truck to our getaway cabin because I knew we'd have to license the truck or we'd get pulled over. So I had a 30-day tag on it, but I actually had to mail the title to where we were staying in Tennessee. And as soon as the title got there, then we were going to leave and go somewhere else, although we didn't know yet where we were going to go. And the marshals figured out, and the FBI fugitive team, they figured out that was most likely me that had sent the title to the cabin in Tennessee. And so they came to find us.
That's right. So that's how you really start the book, is
Yes, that's the beginning of the book. That's the beginning of the book, the 100-mile-an-hour car chase and crash head on into a tree. That's the beginning of the book. Yeah.
And when you were on the run, were you aware of all the media presence and how interested the public and people were in your story?
I had no idea. I should have known, I'm not stupid. I should have known, but I had no idea. And John never had us turn on the radio or the TV. We had some CDs to listen to music, but we never turned on the radio and we never turned on the TV. And it was because he didn't want me to know how big of a search it was going to be, because he knew I would freak out.
Gotcha. So that he kind of kept that information from you.
Yes.
And when did it dawn on you that everybody wanted to hear the story and not know the story? I mean,
not until we were arrested, really. And then, even then, so we were in Chattanooga. We'd gone to a movie and we were driving home, but we stopped at a Barnes and Noble because John wanted to buy me a book. And it just so happened that the FBI fugitive team was sitting in the Barnes and Noble parking lot trying to plan what they were going to do for the next day, because they'd been to our cabin that day, but we weren't there. And so they were trying to figure out what their next step was going to be. And we walked right in front of them, which is just stunningly coincidental.
And they recognized you right
And they
away.
recognized us. And so they followed us onto the interstate and they set up this trap. So about an hour down the interstate, we came up over a hill, and the whole highway, they had closed down the interstate to oncoming traffic. They'd closed all the exits. And we came up over this hill, and the whole highway was filled with police cars, 50 or 60 police cars, all different departments and colors and shapes and styles. And then they had a helicopter overhead shining a light on us. And I thought John was going to pull over. I told him we needed to pull over, but then one of the police officers made him mad, and he just took off, and he said he was going to just run until we ran out of gas or we crashed. And it was terrifying. And we did crash into a tree.
Like they literally pulled you out of the window of the broken.
Yes, they did.
And he had a gun, right? You had a weapon of some
Yeah,
sort.
at the cabin. The guns were at the cabin. Yeah.
So did you understand the enormity at the time once you had the car crash? Like,
yes, reality really hit me in the face then. And, I remember John jumped out of the truck really quickly because he said, they're going to start shooting, Toby. I've got to get out. I can't let you get shot. And he jumped out of the truck, and I couldn't get my seatbelt. I think I might have had a concussion and blacked out for a moment. And I know I had the wind knocked out of me, but I was just kind of stunned and didn't quite comprehend what was going on. But I couldn't get my seatbelt unlatched. And my window had broken out, and the windshield had broken out. And this police officer came running up to my window, and he was dressed in all black with a little walkie-talkie, and he had a little black machine gun. And he stuck the gun in my face and said, "Get out of the truck." And I tried to say, "I can't unhook my seatbelt," but I couldn't talk because I had the wind knocked out of me. And he reached in and unlatched the seatbelt, and he said, "I'll get you out of there." And he just pulled me out by the shirt on my shoulder and my hair, and pulled me through the window and threw me on the ground. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is like real stuff here. So I was kind of startled at, I knew that they would be aggressive to get John because he was a felon, but I was just the dog lady, and I didn't expect it for me, but I learned pretty quickly that, I was a felon too.
Right. Did they think you were armed and dangerous? I mean, was that the APB out there, or what?
Yes.
Did you?
Yes.
Okay, so
they thought we were armed and dangerous. Yes.
And so you were taken to the local jail, and
Mhm.
that's when kind of the media onslaught occurred, right? You
Oh,
talk
it
about
was
that?
just a frenzy and it was just stunning. So on Monday, that was a Friday night. And on Monday morning, they took me to court in Tennessee. And I was in the back seat of a police car and we pulled around the corner into this little downtown. And the woman officer in the front seat said, "Well, we can't go that way." And I looked up to see what they were looking at, and the whole street was filled with news trucks. And that was back in the day where you had to like put down the jacks on the news truck to lift up the big antennas and the satellite dishes, and they had the whole street blocked off, and it was just filled with these big news vans. And I said, "Oh gosh, isn't it just my luck to be coming to court on a day when something big is happening?" And the female officer started laughing. She said, "Honey, you are the big." And I was like, "What?" I didn't connect it, but immediately when we got out of the car, the media they come running like rabid dogs, it seemed, and just almost falling over to get to me and stick a microphone in my face. And it was so bewildering. And I just, I couldn't understand the media frenzy. And it was crazy.
It's right. And you were what? I think you were kind of at that time married, two
Yes.
kids in college, like you
Mhm,
said. So maybe
mhm.
that might have been it like this. Somebody becomes a criminal, must have
Yes. Yeah.
touched a nerve or something with people.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I mean, I was surprised, but you had $1 million bond. That's what they wanted to?
That's what the bail bondsman told me he was going to set. It was $1 million bond. And I was just flabbergasted because, if somebody drew a line in the street and said, "Don't cross that line," I would have never crossed it, which I guess they didn't believe. But yeah, they wanted to set $1 million bond. I don't know if they actually did, because when he told me, when the bail bondsman said he was going to recommend $1 million bonds, I just said, "Oh, forget it. I'm not getting out," and I never even pursued it.
Yeah, it's incredibly expensive. I think they
Hmm.
scrape off 10-15% of that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Even if you can come up with $1 million.
Hmm.
And so you're kind of a straight and narrow person put into an environment with some very different characters than you
Hmm.
used to be around at Sprint, right?
Yes. Totally different. Yes. A
Can you talk
complete
about what
change.
it was like kind of adapting to that?
So, this is kind of interesting. So they kept me when I got taken back to Kansas, I was in the Leavenworth County Jail, and the administrator there put me in this medical observation room for the first 3 weeks because he didn't want to put me in general population. And he came in and he said, "Why are you still here?" And I said, um, "Well, take any one of a million reasons. The $1 million bond, the horde of media camped out at my parents' driveway. I mean, you name it. That's why I'm here." And he said, "Well, I didn't expect you to be here. Um, I thought you would have bonded out. So, but I need this medical observation room for a medical patient. So I'm going to have to put you in SEG." And I said, "I'm not going to SEG. SEG is where they lock you up alone for 24 hours a day and you don't have any interaction with anyone. And generally it's a punishment." And I said, "I'm not going to SEG because I didn't do anything wrong." And so I convinced him to put me into the general population. And if I had trouble, I would let him know. So my first roommate this was my first experience as an inmate. She was 19 years old and she probably outweighed me by 200 pounds. And when we were first locked down for the first night, and she started talking and she said, I'm here because I robbed the Chinese delivery driver. I don't know why I robbed the Chinese delivery driver, but I just decided I needed to. And I ordered Chinese food. And when he pulled up, I said, give me my food and give me your money." And she said, "I got $7 of my food." And I knew the police were going to come, but I just sat on my porch and ate my Chinese food and waited for him to come. And she said, "I don't know why I robbed that Chinese driver. It's just because the voices tell me to do things." And then she pulled up her sleeve and showed me her arms and said, "Do you cut yourself?" "See, I cut myself. I don't know why I cut myself, but I cut myself because I think it lets the pain out. I don't understand why I cut myself. I don't know anybody else that cuts themselves." And then she said, "I have this little dog and I love this little dog. Do you think he'll forgive me for being gone? Do you think he'll understand that I'm coming back? Will he still love me when I come back?" I mean, she's just talking a mile a minute. And then she said, "I hear voices. Do you hear voices?" And I said, no. And she said, I hear voices. And she said, and they get louder and louder and louder. And I have to do what they tell me to do, or they just keep getting so loud that I can't ignore them. And she said, and those voices tell me to hurt people. But then she said, looked at me and she said, but I don't think I'll hurt you. I like you. Do you want to play cards? And it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But, we played cards till 4 a.m. and I kind of resolved that I would never fall asleep before she did. I'd wait for her to fall asleep because I don't know what her voices were going to do. And, but Jessica turned out to be a sweet girl that had a lot of issues, and she became my first friend in prison. But I did find that so many of the women in prison were women who had issues that they just didn't know how to deal with. And they didn't have the skill set or the people around them to help them deal with their issues. But they were people just like I was. And they had issues that they didn't know that were bigger than they were. And, I found this real sisterhood behind bars. And, I'm still friends with quite a few of those women today. And that's some of the strongest friendships I've ever had.
I mean, because you're locked in there together going through a stressful time too.
I
assume that's kind of a bonding. It also sounds like your family was very supportive too. They didn't.
Yes, my mom and dad and my brothers were so supportive of me. My mom bent over backwards for me. I'm not sure I would have survived prison without her.
That's amazing. And what happened with KSI asked, what happened with the dog program after?
Oh, so I'm so happy with what happened with the dog program. I was concerned that they would cancel it because I was running it virtually by myself. I had some people who helped me when they could, but a couple of the officers in the prison decided to keep the program going, and they did. And I think they just closed it like last summer. So it ran for 15 years after I was gone.
That's amazing. 1,000 dogs that's a tremendous amount of placements.
Yes. Yes.
It really is extraordinary. And so you're in there, and there were other people too who were famous with you. There's other women. You're getting transferred around, and then the feds actually decided to charge you too.
Yes, so, right after I got sentenced to my state sentence of 21 months, and I had a meltdown when my attorney told me that I was going to have to do 21 months because I thought maybe I'd do 3 or 4 months. That seemed like a lot of time, but when he told me I had to do 21 months, I just had a big meltdown because I said, there's no way I can do it. And he said, I think you can do it. And I realized, I could do it. And so I got settled into state prison. And then just a month or two after I got into state prison, and I was kind of just starting to feel comfortable and thinking, okay, I figured out how this works. I can do this. I can make it. And then I saw in the news, which is how I learned everything about my case, was on the news or in the headlines of the newspaper, that the feds had indicted me for providing handguns to a felon. And I didn't even know that was, 7 or 8 months after the escape. And I had a huge meltdown. I had a panic attack and ended up, got moved out of the state prison into a federal facility for 11 months while they did the federal charges and finally got me through court there. And
you went to Leavenworth, right?
Yeah. It was not Leavenworth Federal Prison, but another prison in Leavenworth.
Okay, gotcha.
So Leavenworth Federal Prison is just for men. But I got a 27-month federal sentence, but it was ordered to run concurrently with my state sentence. So it gave me a total of 27 months in prison.
So you served that full 27
months. I did, yes.
And you got through kind of crafting there. They allowed you at least some kind of creative outlet.
Yes. Different places. Some of them had activities to try to just help the monotony because, literally the 15 months I spent in the federal system, there was absolutely nothing to do. I just felt like a book on a shelf at a bookstore waiting for somebody to pick it up and buy it because there was there was nowhere to go. You're just locked into this room and there's no, gymnasium or anywhere to go do anything like sometimes you think prisons like. In this particular place, there wasn't any of that. So the boredom was just insane. But one lady in the community, an elderly woman, was a quilter, and she had come up to the prison and asked if she could bring in scraps of fabric and have a quilting class with us. And And it was awesome. It was a lifesaver for us.
Right, and that kind of was the bond and kind of coming together, that
Yes.
kind of the camaraderie too,
Yes.
right?
We'd sit and craft for hours a day if they'd let us. And, we'd have this bag of scraps of fabric that any other person would have thrown away. I mean, they were just thin little pieces and nothing that matched, but we put it all together and made things. And it was just wonderful.
And I mean, so you went through that. There's a lot more details in the book. You talk about the shame dragon. You talk about a lot of stuff. You come out the other side. I mean, we're kind of in the wrapping up. We're about 35 minutes. What was it like to kind of come to terms with what happened, and how did you kind of find some peace with your decision?
So I realized, my life outside of prison before the escape was so hectic and busy, and that's how I kept it. But when I was in prison, I had no deadlines, no projects, no deliverables, no emails, no phone calls. I mean, I had nothing. I just had all this time. And I realized that I could use that time to go back through my life and really dig in deep and do a lot of introspection about my past and, dig up the things in my life that I never dealt with, like the death of my daughter, and work through those traumas and start to heal myself so that I could understand who I was, and I could kind of start building a foundation for a future that I could envision where I can make a difference in the world.
And you have this Unleashed series. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I created this series of workbooks. Right now there's 3 of them. I think there'll be 6 altogether, but they are a program to help women go through that very same journey that I did for myself in prison, of going back through my life and examining, past events and digging open those old wounds and trying to heal them so that I can let things go and move forward. So, we go through, the first workbook is for personal development, develop discernment and boundaries and gratitude and, some healthy core things that you need in your character if you want to move forward. And then the second book is about how to find and cultivate a healthy community, because a lot of the women that I knew who were in trouble, it was because of who they hung out with. So, it's a skill to learn to be in a healthy community and to be able to receive from a healthy community. Because some people, they don't want people to help them. They want to do things on their own, but you need to learn how to let people help you. And then the third workbook is, for women who feel a calling to do something, but they don't quite know what it is. And it's just some exercises to help you kind of figure out where that fire in your soul's coming from.
Right. That's very helpful. And you kind of became an activist a little bit while you were incarcerated.
Yes, I did. I did.
Got some books involved and tried to make.
I started a book drive and got better food on the commissary. And there were just some things that, when I can make a difference, I stood up and tried.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Really great job. Great job on the book. And thanks so much for your time. We're at about 38 minutes. Is there anything you'd like to add or anything I missed? And then maybe you can say where's the best place to get the book and
so
social media.
My social media, I'm on Instagram. It's just Toby Dorr, and it's TOBYDORR. On Facebook, it's Toby Dorr Author, and my website is tobydorr.com. The book is available on Amazon or in any bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can go in. If they don't have it in stock, they can order it for you. But Living with Conviction is anywhere your favorite bookstore where books are sold.
And anything else you'd like to add? Or
it's
just really
none of us are our worst mistake. I mean, that's what it boils down to. We can all rise above the worst thing we've ever done, and we can find a way to use those lessons to do something good in the world.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time. Really fascinating
You're
story.
welcome.
You have a lot of courage to come and share that, so I appreciate it. And the book, again, the full title is Living with Conviction, Unexpected Sisterhood, Healing and Redemption in the Wake of Life-Altering Choices, just published June 15th, 2022. There is an audiobook too, so people can see that on Kindle, audiobook, or get a
and the audiobook I read myself. So
great.
It's my favorite of the 4 versions of the book. Yeah.
All right. Well, congratulations and thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
All right, great. Take care. Stay there.
All right,
Stay there. I'm going to end the podcast.